Hey class! So today is Monday, June 29th, and it is also the due date for your assignment, which is the first assignment of Unit 2, and it is your annotated bibliography for one stakeholder. So as you can see, I am on the prompt that you all have access to through Blackboard. I literally just clicked here onto the assignment and I click this PDF, which brought me to this prompt. So I want to hit the high points to make sure we're all on the same page and that you can get the most amount of credit that you can for this assignment and you can be the best set up for moving forward in this class. So here we go. You are preparing for this bigger assignment, which is your mapping the conversations essay. And so this is kind of a scaffolding assignment. So the more you do here, the fuller your annotations are, the better your sources, just the more successful you're going to be later down the road. So if you think, why are we doing this? This is one of those assignments that is going to be directly beneficial for you. So you're making a bibliography with annotations for sources related to one stakeholder for your project. So all of you have gone through and made a list of different stakeholders, different groups or individuals who care or should care about your issue. And so you're choosing just one of those stakeholders, and all of your sources are going to be related to this one stakeholder. And so you're going to have your sources, and then underneath every single one of those sources, you are going to have two different paragraphs, okay? So a one paragraph summary of that source and a paragraph that evaluates the source and explains its usefulness for your project. So one thing that I saw in a lot of y'all's draft work toward this project is that you had your two paragraphs, and then underneath that you had a sort of works cited page with your works cited with your bibliography. But the way that this should look, according to MLA and according to the samples that are also on Blackboard, is that it should all look like a works cited page that is just big and fat. So you'll have, you can just put annotated bibliography in a cool title if you want. And then you're going to have your source in what we refer to as a hanging indent. So that is going to be when the first line is not indented, like all of these, and then that second line and everything else is going to be indented to the same degree. And so you're going to have your annotation, your source, and you're going to follow that up immediately with your annotation underneath. So a lot of y'all did the paragraphs, then the annotation, flip that. It's all one per source. And so you won't have a works cited page because all of it is. And then just some other things here in the further explanation. You want to be looking for, finding, and using 4 really high quality, useful, reliable sources related to one of your stakeholders. And within these sources, you're going to want one that is primary and then at least one that is secondary. So just so we're clear on the distinction between those two, the primary source is going to be when your stakeholder is speaking from their perspective for themselves. Okay, so maybe if your stakeholder is the government, what is some government paper that has been produced that you could dig into, for example? And then the secondary sources are going to be all of those things that have something to say, in some way commenting on, complicating, complementing what your primary source has put out. So one thing, maybe this might be a little off from this course, but the way I think of it is basically a primary source, if you're writing a literature essay, which I do a lot of, is Shakespeare's play. Okay, let's say Othello. It's my very favorite. And then all of the secondary sources are going to be what people have said about Othello. And trust me, there is a ton of that. So you want to have one at least where the stakeholder is speaking for themselves, and then one at least, that I recommend multiple here, of the secondary sources where someone else is commenting on that primary source. And it doesn't have to be directly. They don't have to cite that primary source, but what are they saying about it that you can work into a conversation with each other? Okay, so for the paragraph about your summary, here are some really good tips about what to include in there. If you're thinking, how do I even summarize? I know what summary is, but maybe not exactly for this assignment. What am I expecting? Well, here's what it is. I want you to be fair and clear and accurate. I think sometimes we like to just read a source and then tear it apart, but it's really important that you read a source and you can be charitable to that author. You can go in not just distrusting them, but really think, what are they having to say before you put your own bias, your own opinion on that. And you want to communicate that in your summaries. What is fair and clear? So include things like, what is their main point? What is the thesis? What is the crux of this argument? And you can use some of these action verbs if you're looking for ways to put it. Also, think about the context of this author, of this source, who wrote it, when, where was it published, who is it targeting, what is it responding to. All of these different things kind of set us up as the reader for where you found this source. And then kind of explain the reasoning, the main claims. Use a little bit of that evidence, but don't go overboard. Make sure you can certainly use quotes, but that should not be the bulk of the annotation. It should be framed by you in your own words, what you're taking out of it, what you want your audience to be taking out of it. But definitely use those quotes, those powerful quotes, if you think it'll be helpful. And when it says include the parenthetical citations, that means parentheses at the end of a quotation with the author's name and the page number. If it's an online source and there's no page, then that's fine too. Just put the author's name and then the name of the article if that's applicable. If all that's confusing, just check out MLA for the guidelines on that. And then, of course, like I was talking about, avoid your own opinion here. This is just saying another way you can think about an annotated bibliography is that if you were trying to figure out, if you wanted to read a source, what kind of information would be helpful if someone else did an annotation, and you could look at that real quick and be like, boop, 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 okay, is this going to be helpful for my research? It tells you everything you need to know about the main claims without you having to read all of it. That's kind of how you can think of this. Pretend that you are making like a list of annotations for someone who might be interested in researching the same thing you're interested in, and you can kind of present, here's a quick list of things I found, here's what it's about mostly. If any of these relate to your topic, feel free to do further research and pick these. And then there's also going to be that second paragraph where you basically answer these questions. Why is this useful, credible, reliable for your project? And what does it help you to do, understand? What angle is it coming from that maybe you hadn't considered? What is the context, these things, and how are you specifically going to apply it to your project? How is this useful? Why is this useful? So here are some guidelines. Just make sure that you have that title, that, like I discussed in an earlier email, make it fun. Don't just put annotated bibliography. Put a fun title, annotated bibliography. It's also going to be really helpful to me if you put straight under the title, just put stakeholder, and whatever your stakeholder is. That'll be super helpful for me. It'll also be helpful if on your primary source, you write the annotation and put in bold primary source, just so I can easily see, okay, stakeholder, primary source, they match, they have them, check, and it helps me understand way easier. Make sure you're citing, and all of this is pretty much what I've already covered. If you want in that A-B range, basically do everything but better, more sophisticated, more complex, more effective, and more thoughtful. So if you have any questions about that, please reach out. I look forward to seeing y'all's sources that you choose and the annotated bibliographies that you come up with. And that's it for this video, guys.